They built a monument. No name, no record, no explanation. Just a date of birth, and a death that hadn't happened yet. When Xi Jinping first saw it, he didn't speak. Not because he didn't understand it, but because part of him had always known it would appear. Why was a funeral prepared for a man still alive? Who placed it there? And what secret message was buried beneath the stone? Tonight, we enter the part of Zhongnanhai where even memory is considered dangerous. This is the memorial that was built too early. The stone that had no name. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Zhongnanhai. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the courtyard fog still hung heavy like wet silk. Only a handful of staff were on the grounds, most of them sweeping stone paths or arranging red flags for a minor ceremony no one would remember. But Xi Jinping remembered what he saw that day. A young groundskeeper named Lu Fan was trimming hedges near the south pavilion when his electric shears suddenly died. Frustrated, he followed the power cable toward the maintenance outlet, and that's when he noticed it. Tucked behind a low garden wall and concealed by a row of perfectly trimmed cypress trees, was a black stone monument. Polished, minimal, and silent. It stood no taller than Xi himself. No cameras faced it. No flowers decorated its base. But when Lu Fan leaned in, he saw something etched into the polished surface. Born June 15, 1953. Died. The death date was scratched. Not blank. Scratched. With something sharp. Intentional. Desperate. Lu froze. He had seen enough propaganda to recognize Xi's birthdate. And that meant only one thing. This was a grave. Built for someone still alive. He reported it, of course. That was protocol. But he was told the stone was part of an abandoned war memorial project. Historical artifact, nothing more, they said. 3 days later, Lu Fan was transferred to a naval base outside Dalian. No explanation. That's when whispers began to circulate inside the inner guard unit. A file name passed only in shorthand, Echo Stone. According to internal chatter, the stone had not been built by any party department. There was no procurement order, no records of its installation. And when intelligence officers reviewed satellite images of the courtyard from just a month earlier, the stone wasn't there. It had appeared. When Xi Jinping was briefed, he didn't speak for 12 seconds. Then he asked just one question. How did they get the curve right? Everyone in the room stayed silent, because they didn't know what he meant. But he did. The top curve of the character used in his name had a faint asymmetry in the stone engraving, just like his personal signature. An error he never corrected, because it wasn't an error. It was his signal to himself that something was real, and now it was carved into his own headstone. The visitor who signed nothing. 2 nights after the discovery of the monument, a vehicle entered Zhongnanhai through Gate 5 at 2:37 a.m. sharp. No license plate. No record in the entry log. But 4 security cameras briefly glitched at that same moment. 7 seconds of black. A silent Mercedes Maybach, tinted beyond legal spec, made its way toward the south garden. Inside, 1 passenger. He exited the vehicle wearing a plain gray Zhongshan suit. No insignia, no staff ID, no briefcase. But the guard watching through thermal confirmed. He moved like someone who'd been there before. No one approached him. He didn't knock on any doors. He simply walked, slowly, deliberately, to the monument. And stood. For 9 minutes. Then he did something that made even the seasoned analyst monitoring the feed whisper to himself. What the hell? The man knelt, pulled out a cloth, and began wiping the scratched death date clean. Only, it didn't clean, because the scratch wasn't on the surface. It was under the stone's protective seal. That meant one thing. The scratch had been made before the seal was applied, before the monument had been finished. And whoever this man was, he already knew that. Before leaving, the man reached into his jacket. Not for a pen, not for a badge, but for a small ink stamp. He pressed it onto the stone. The mark didn't show up immediately, but under infrared it was unmistakable. A broken circle, half complete, the symbol used by the Internal Security Division to denote unfinished business. Then the man turned, entered the car, and disappeared. By the time guards arrived, there were only tire marks, leading nowhere. Later that week, an internal report titled Sovereign Echo Incident, Phase 0, was quietly archived. It listed one item recovered from the monument site. Signed, none. Known, 1. Xi Jinping's reaction? He canceled 3 public appearances, called off his weekly Politburo briefing, and ordered a personal review of Project Silk Vault, a black program that had been dormant for 8 years. Only one entry existed in that archive. Directive 9. Prepare the room. No one outside the leadership circle knew what the room meant. But those who did knew it was only opened when a living person's end was being simulated. The test that was never meant for him. Project Silk Vault wasn't meant for the living. It was conceived during a chaotic year, long before she took office, originally designed to simulate the psychological impact of leadership transitions in the event of premature absence. A funeral before death. A legacy preview. An emotional collapse test. It was only supposed to be a simulation, run on neural modeling frameworks using behavioral data and emotional triggers. But in late 2020, it was shut down indefinitely. Rumor had it someone had attempted to run the simulation not with data, but with a living subject. And now, she had reopened it. No one on his current advisory team had clearance to access the room. Not even the Minister of State Security. But one retired systems analyst, codenamed Mirror Sparrow, received a call that night. She hadn't spoken to anyone in Zhongnanhai for 5 years. When she entered the room, sealed deep below Archive Hall C, she found everything untouched. Dust, frozen air, soft lighting that never turned off. And in the center, a reclining seat. Electrodes neatly coiled. A monitor already flickering with the words. Subject identified, XJP_1. Simulation status, 7% integrity loss. Proceed anyway. She arrived without a word. No guards, no aid, just him and the room. Mirror Sparrow asked, "Are you sure?" He didn't answer, just sat down, placed the electrodes on himself like he'd done it before. The test began. What the room showed him has never been fully recorded, but fragments were later pulled from the machine's buffer cache. A military parade where no one saluted. A national address where the crowd spoke before he did. His own funeral, where the screen flickered before the coffin closed. A moment of silence, followed by a voice saying, "You were not the final version." After the test, she didn't speak for 6 hours. He walked out. Didn't say thank you. Didn't order the room sealed again. He just whispered, "They started it without me." The message buried under the stone. 3 weeks after the room incident, excavation crews were dispatched to Zhongnanhai under the guise of plumbing renovations. But their real task was clear. Uncover what lay beneath the monument. She had ordered it himself. No paper trail, no authorizing stamp. Just a handwritten note slipped to one senior logistics officer. Dig. Quietly. At 2:12 a.m., the black stone was lifted with padded hooks and placed on silk-lined scaffolding. What they found underneath changed everything. A capsule. Steel. Etched with a phrase. Return unopened. She watched the feed from a secure control room. He didn't flinch. He just whispered, "Open it anyway." Inside the capsule were 6 items. A fragment of a childhood photograph. She, age 9, at a lake no official biography mentioned. A worn page from the Little Red Book, margins filled with what looked like Xi's own handwriting, but written in a dialect he never used. A voice recorder, dead, corroded, but with one red light still blinking. A second ink stamp, identical to the one seen on the monument, but this time unbroken. A letter, sealed, addressed simply, To the one who was replaced. A date. Scratched on the inner steel wall. April 11th, 2025. That was 3 months from now. She took only the letter. No one saw him read it. But after that day, his schedule shifted. A trade deal he'd pushed for months was shelved. 2 major military drills were postponed indefinitely. And for the first time in 5 years, she requested a private call with an exiled historian once accused of disloyalty. Their conversation, never recorded. But hours later, the historian was granted return access to China and went missing the same night. As for the capsule, it was resealed, returned beneath the stone. But this time, a different engraving was added to the bottom of the monument. Memory is the first casualty of authority. Only she and 3 others knew it was there. And of the 3, 2 have already disappeared. The funeral speech that was never given. There is a secure wing in Zhongnanhai known only by codename Mirror Red. It's not marked on any blueprint. There are no guards, because its door recognizes only one fingerprint. Inside, a theater. Empty. Except for a single chair, one screen, and an old reel-to-reel projector still humming like it had never stopped. The room plays just one thing. A video. Sealed in 2009. Last accessed on March 3, 2025. The tape is labeled simply, Eulogy, Draft V.3, Final Candidate. Xi Jinping sat down, alone. Pressed play. A voice, his own, began to speak. But it wasn't a speech he remembered writing. It wasn't even from the present. To those who came before, and those who thought they knew me, I offer only this. Power is not truth, and truth has no need for monuments. He stared, frozen, because as the eulogy continued, it described moments from his life that had not yet happened. The night he would vanish, the last order he would give, the final hand he would shake, and then a name, spoken clearly, but not his, the one who replaced him. She stood, stopped the tape, smashed the reel, then called for Mirror Red to be sealed permanently, but not destroyed, because even a ghost must have somewhere to live. He never spoke of the monument again, but insiders say that on April 11, 2025, the date scratched into the capsule, she stood at his window at dawn. He looked toward the south garden, and whispered to no one, "They were ready for me to go, before I was ready to arrive." The monument still stands, still unmarked, still watching, and every year on that date, someone places one white flower at its base. No name, no message, just a silent ritual, for a funeral that was never held, and a man who may never truly leave. They say power is about control, but sometimes the scariest part is what power refuses to explain. A monument with no name, a funeral prepared before the death, and a silence that still echoes through the corridors of the most guarded place in China. We may never know who built the stone or why it was placed, but one thing is certain. Someone knew Xi Jinping's end before even he did. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as haunting and thought-provoking as we did, make sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Hidden Xi, because the most powerful stories are the ones no one dares to tell.